What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, and we are finally moving on from rookie drafts. And I understand for some people, you haven't even done your Dynasty rookie draft yet. So you're like, what do you mean finally? It's all I've done for the last month, and I am just so happy to be working on something else. I would imagine equally as happy my co-host, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you this morning?
Good. Glad to be back after a week off. Yesterday was my birthday, and so I just chilled out most of the day, and so that was great. Feeling nice and rested for this week.
So did you take the time on your birthday to remind your mother that it's only Mother's Day for her because you were born that day, so your day is more important than her day?
No, actually, that happens the opposite way. She always reminds me that I'm the reason that today is my birthday is actually Mother's Day. I don't know if you know this, Ryan. But it's
okay.
I was born on Mother's Day, and so every year my birthday is on Mother's Day, not on the 14th.
Okay, that's actually the most amazing birthday story ever.
Very sweet.
And if you haven't picked up on it yet, easily the nicest person on our show, probably the nicest person I've met in the whole fantasy football world, is our guest today. She is probably one of our first repeat guests from one year to the next year. Kelly Singh, Kelly in Phoenix. Kelly, good morning. Welcome to the show. I am so happy to see you on the Club Fantasy Airways once again.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here, alive and well and awake.
And we are so happy to have you. If you don't know Kelly, first of all, crawl out from whatever rock you're under. But Kelly is the VP of Marketing at Trophy Smack. Kelly is the host of Club Fantasy's wildly successful Who's Your Caddy, where she is just doubling people's money every single week, along with her co-host talking DFS golf. And probably most importantly, Kelly is one half of the dynamic duo that is Women of Fantasy Football. Kelly, what else are you working on right now? Anything fun in the works?
I've been hosting a fledgling podcast on a different network that's really not part of the fantasy community. So I feel like it's okay to say this. But
first and foremost, it's okay to pitch yourself, promo yourself, anything you're doing. If we had a competitor and you worked for that competitor, I would encourage you to promo it right now. So go to work.
It's the Sick Podcast Network. And it started when I was a guest for Adam Rank on his Bears podcast for a few times last season, or 2 seasons ago, I should say. And then last season, the network approached and asked if I would do an Arizona Cardinals podcast. So all of last season, I did the Sick Podcast with Kelly Singh. And it's actually been gaining tons of traction, although I've been off for a month. Recovering from breast cancer, which is still so weird to say out loud, but I will be back for this season. If you want to tune in, just follow me on Twitter, just like you would for any of our other shows.
Absolutely. It's going to be a high drama season, I think, for Arizona too. And the drama in Arizona is actually going to lead to my first question. But before we get into my first question, let's get the draft up on the screen. So, as I mentioned, no rookie draft today. We are going to get this whole thing started with a Dynasty startup. We're still in Dynasty season, not quite ready for redraft yet, but it's going to be Superflex. Superflex is the flavor of the month when it comes to Dynasty. You want to have those value with those quarterbacks. So we are going to go ahead and get things started. My guests today, Kelly and Austin, both start off with the 101 and the 102. So you guys are going to be picking early, but as you're all aware, we don't ever start by talking about the draft. I have some fun questions for everybody. But before I get started, Austin, I'm going to put you on the clock and let you go ahead and get started. And then I am going to ask the question that I just saw recently, a poll on Twitter. Is Kyler Murray still an elite dynasty quarterback? And with this being Superflex, we're going to see a ton of elite dynasty quarterbacks going off the board here early, except my girl Kelly starts us off with a wrinkle, but we'll get into that in a little bit. My question to you guys is, and I want you guys to work together on this one, who are the elite dynasty quarterbacks in fantasy football right now? Kelly, you can go first.
I feel like the quarterback space is so full of talent at this point. It's a very interesting time to be alive in a Superflex league because you can't really go wrong. But when we're talking dynasty, obviously we're going to want younger players. Patrick Mahomes, as you saw, going number 1, younger player, superstar. Jalen Hurts, again, another superstar. You're probably wondering why I'm not saying Kyler Murray. I'll let you.
Well, no, okay. So Mahomes, obviously, I think that's widely accepted that you're going to have Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. I personally think, and I ended up with the 9th pick in a Dynasty Superflex is starting up today, and I quickly realized I think there are 8. So I wanted to see if you guys mentioned my 8. So you knocked out 2. Austin, give me some more.
Yeah, I agree. We're about at the 7 or 8 range. I would add in Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. I think Justin Herbert's still in there, Lamar Jackson, and I think my last one's going to be Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence was going to be my wild card as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I would actually just limit it to those. I'm not quite comfortable to throw Justin Fields in there yet, even though his ADP might suggest it. So I think, what was that, 6?
I think I put you at 7 because I count Fields and I'm at 8, and you guys named every one that I agree with. So my question to you guys then, obviously Austin left off Fields. So let's start with that, Kelly. Let's talk about Justin Fields. Justin Fields, I'm not going to pull the thing up right now, but I believe he's 23 years old. I think this is his 3rd year in the league, 2nd year in this offense. They finally go out and get DJ Moore. Do you agree with Austin? Is Justin Fields an elite dynasty quarterback?
I think this season is going to cement that one way or the other, because last season he did have some additional weaponry surrounding him. He got his feet wet on that field. And this year they just went balls to the wall, almost Detroit style, in saying, we're going to give you everything we've got to go out there and win. So yeah, I think this is a turning point for Justin Fields. Should he succeed, eliteness. Should he not, he fades into the background.
And then the last one before, because this is going to kind of lead into my next question. So then let's talk about Kyler Murray and Kelly. Obviously, it's the hometown team. We're not going to give Kyler the respect anymore. Kyler was, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say Kyler had an argument to be the QB1 before we saw the immense growth from Josh Allen and then Patrick. You probably should have never had him over Patrick Mahomes, but I'm certain people did. But regardless, Kyler, after back-to-back bad seasons, injury problems, we're ready to move Kyler down to kind of like that 2nd tier and in Dynasty.
What's interesting is I had this discussion overnight from last night into this morning with somebody on Twitter in a similar manner. And what it was is the shortness of Kyler Murray being an obstacle. But my thought here was he's been in the league 4 years, or as the quarterback for the Cardinals 4 years. He has been Rookie of the Year. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. He's had, I would say, 1 amazing season out of 4, and he's somewhat injury prone. So what we're seeing is a rebuild, and I'm going to put it in the same category as we just did Justin Fields. This is not the make or breaker for Kyler Murray because he'll play half the season if we're lucky. They're not going to rush that injury by any means, and there's nobody to throw to, essentially. I mean, there's a couple, but that's neither here nor there. I think it's going to be his 6th year, and perhaps even, okay, I'll just go 1 more year, 1 more season, and then it's going to be that. Is he going to make it? Is he going to not make it? They have a load of picks for next draft, this rebuild year. So yeah, I think you should pick him, stock him away. And that's going to be about it. It's not anything to get excited about. I'm seeing a lot of sell this year, buy next year. So it's just iffy. It's really...
Kelly, I'm going to have you keep going because this is the question. I've actually made this trade in a Dynasty, and Austin, I'm going to have you answer this one as well. Kyler Murray or the 102 in a Superflex, meaning you get your choice of these rookie quarterbacks. Would you rather have one of these rookies, or would you rather have Kyler right now, Kelly?
This year?
Yeah, this year. I mean, it's Dynasty, so forever.
Well, that's true. But I was just wondering if you meant
these
for
3
the
rookies.
Next draft.
No,
for this draft, yes, because I feel like there's a plethora of talented quarterbacks in the 2023 rookie season draft. So I would trade Kyler Murray for the 102 this season.
Austin?
This one is tough. When you made it 2023, it made it harder for me. 2024, it is clear. I would rather have an early 2024.
Okay.
Wow.
I think I might hold on to Kyler at that point. I don't feel like confident enough that any of these are going to, any of this class is going to make their way into that elite status. Whereas Kyler, like it could still pan out for him.
Okay.
But I just feel like how many years it doesn't feel that long for me as a native here in Phoenix. It feels like yesterday almost that we got Kyler Murray. And when I was arguing with this person, I'm like, it wasn't even arguing. They were just being stupid, but I'm pulling like stats.
Hold on a second. I just want anyone who is ever going to decide to come at Kelly to understand what she just said. She said, we weren't even arguing. They were just being stupid. That means she didn't even see what you were saying as legitimate. So you've wasted your time at this point arguing with the great Kelly Singh, but please keep going, Kelly.
There's that much point in arguing with me about anything.
Because you're just being stupid.
I am a big fact checker and I will mince words. I am not above mincing words to win an argument. But the point is it feels like it wasn't that long ago, and I pulled up stats just to make sure I was being factual myself. And here we go.
Yeah, you are up on the clock. While Kelly is making her picks, and I'll give Austin time to make his picks, I want to do some of the standard reminders I do. If you have never played Dynasty before, Dynasty drafts are typically 20 to 25 to 30 to 35 rounds long. This show, I get us out of here in an hour every day. So we are only going 15 rounds on this show. So just know if you've never played Dynasty, it's not your standard 15-person draft. I also set this up with 3 wide receivers, 2 flex, and then obviously the Superflex. So don't ever expect that you would only have this amount of players. And both Kelly and Austin will tell you at the end of the show, if the draft had continued, they probably would have added this or added that, because you may see people punt on a certain position, namely tight end. Clearly, Austin didn't go that route, but you may see people punt on a position, and then they would have taken a lot of that position later on in the draft. Kelly, I see you've made your pick as well. So let's keep continuing with the Kyler Murray discussion, the non-argument.
Yeah, I looked back at those stats and I'm like, let's make sure I'm being factual here. And I'm like, holy crap, it's been 4 whole years. This is his 5th year. So we're looking at a guy pushing now into his late 20s. It is amazing to me to think that it's been that long, honestly. So after this year, is he now an elder that we're talking Dynasty? People weigh that out, obviously. So that's where I was on trading for one of these 2023 rookie quarterbacks who are, I would say 3 of 5 are going to make immediate impact probably. Yeah. So that was kind of the rationale there.
I say it's an interesting turn of events that the girl in Arizona said, get rid of Kyler, get the young guy. And Austin's like, no, let's keep the young guys. So
that's where I started. But the more I think about this and hearing Kelly, I'm like, you know what? You've convinced me. Because here's the other thing about Kyler Murray. Arizona's going to be bad this year.
Oh, very
They
bad.
may end up with the first 2 draft picks in the 2024 draft. And we are getting like next level quarterback talent in this upcoming class. They could draft a quarterback next year if they wanted to. Like they'll be in contention for that. And so we may not even have Kyler in Arizona next year, assuming he even plays this year. So yeah, I'm willing to switch my tune on that. The other thing about Kyler is if you look at his past several seasons, he hasn't played a full 17-game season in years. And even when he does, the entire Arizona offense has this tendency to trail off in the second half of the season. And so you're not even getting 17 games of elite production from Kyler.
Yeah. The whole point of this show is draft strategy, guys. And one of the major draft strategies when you're looking at dynasty startups is trades. And we talk about this every week. You cannot do trades in mock drafts. And honestly, I don't even know how that would work because it would be a nightmare logistically. But my question to both of you guys is, I found it very interesting as we got through the first 2 rounds. Anybody who's ever played Superflex with me knows I am walking out of my first 2 picks with 2 quarterbacks, and we only had one person do that in this draft. Jacob Lundy took Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. You each took 1 quarterback. You don't need to specifically talk about your drafts, this specific draft, but what I'd like to know, and Kelly, I'm going to start with you again on this one. How are you about trades in startups? And in the early rounds, are you looking to acquire a second early pick to get that young quarterback in a real league versus a mock draft where you can't kind of do things like that?
I personally am somewhat trade adverse, which I know is a hot topic. But when I go into a draft, I go in with purpose. And usually that purpose does not involve trading up or trading back or any of those kinds of strategies unless I'm pinned to a wall. And in this particular draft, I just did a Dynasty PPR Superflex draft. And it did not look anything like this. Quarterbacks went far later, and everything was focused on that reception. And
in a Superflex?
Yes.
Interesting, because this is the experience in all my Superflexes.
And it was the reception that everybody felt focused. And I feel like it's because there is a lot of quarterback talent this year. You can't really go wrong. I think especially in Superflex. And that maybe that's just me, but would I have gone back and maybe picked up Jalen Hurts seeing what I see now? Yes, I would have. But now here's where we are, and I'm going to continue to focus on the receptions.
Austin, just continue with that thought. So are you a trade up and get 2? Are you, I know you're not trade averse. We had Faith going ahead and throwing out there that she's hollering at the trade adverse. Now, Austin, you talked about earlier this offseason that trading in a startup can be a little intimidating sometimes, but what is your go-to when it comes? I guess my real question here is, what are you doing to make sure you land 2 quarterbacks? Or are you also fine to kind of like take it as it comes to you?
I tend to be more like take it as it comes to me. You know, I'm like intimidate other players with my steadiness and just like, I'm good with my spot. You don't need this spot. It's going to be great. But most of the time I agree with Kelly. There's going to be a second quarterback that I like later on. Like, I don't want to talk about players before they get drafted, but there are
it's a mock, but you don't have to. You're going to talk about your team at the end.
There are some quarterbacks on the board that I'm like, they're my second quarterback. Sure. That's great. I'm totally fine with that right now. And particularly, I'll just read the room. The fact that only one other team went that 2 quarterback route before getting to my pick made me double down and saying like, oh, I'm good. I can wait. Also, we're not drafting with Joel this week, which also influences my draft strategy.
Well, you're essentially building Joel's team, except that you have a running back already. So that's where you messed up. So.
So
reading the room is such an interesting thing. I'm going to throw out how I approach it just because it's very different from you guys. But reading the room might be one of my favorite things. And Kelly, you essentially said the same thing because you said nobody was going quarterback early. And I think that's the most important thing. We joke all the time about industry drafts, industry real drafts, industry mock drafts, where it's almost who's going to be the first idiot to take a quarterback. We play this game of chicken, and then someone lands Josh Allen in the 6th round and they win the championship. And you're like, yeah, well, because I'm a fucking idiot and I let Josh Allen fall to the 6th round. Like, what were we thinking? To where we almost play to our detriment. And Kelly, like you said, if you had saw what things were going to play out with, you probably would have taken Jalen Hurts. So I find that very interesting that we all do kind of read the room. And for those who aren't in the industry, you almost get ridiculed when you're the first one to take a quarterback. But then 2 rounds later, people are like, man, Josh Allen in the 6th. They really start to think about like, we shouldn't have let that happen. I do want to quickly throw out before we move on, though. I am the exact opposite of these two. My very first thing when I'm in a startup is looking to acquire a second first-round pick, and I am a person who notoriously hates draft picks. So I try not to give up a lot in the current startup draft, but I will give you any of my future draft picks because my goal is to make sure those are the last draft picks in that round. So like I right now, and this is the debate I'm having, and we've joked earlier in the offseason, every question I ask is because of some debate I'm going through in fantasy football right now. I'm at the 1-9 in a 10-team league. So I have the 9 and then I have the 12. And I'm like, I don't know if I need to trade up because essentially they're both first round picks. So like, I guess I just stay put now, but like my instinct is like, I'll give you everything to get back into this first round. And so it's just very interesting to hear you both say, I'll stand pat and I'll wait and I'll see how everything's shaking out. You both went tight end early, which is no surprise because I know Austin loves Travis Kelce and I know Kelly loves Mark Andrews. But let's talk candidly here. You two are building two very different teams, and you don't have to talk about your whole team, but you two are building two very different teams from Kevin at the 112 on the other end, who is going with players who have no more than 1 year. I think the average experience on his team right now is 0.25 years because he has rookies and Drake London. So this question pretty much answers itself, but you guys are not ageist. You guys are non-discriminators. You want to win year one, I think is the safe way to say it. Right, Austin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely within reason. Travis Kelce, like, it's Travis Kelce. Yeah. How am I going to just pass on him? Like, and he's only 33, which I know in football terms seems ancient, but in terms of tight ends, like, he could be around another 5 seasons. You know, somebody pointed out recently, like, Travis Kelce didn't start his rookie season, and he entered the league a little bit older, around age 24. So he has less football snaps than other similarly aged players. So I'm very willing to take the older player there. The one place where I'll be a little bit ageist is typically at running back. I try and get as young as possible within reason because just the shelf life of running backs in the NFL is so much lower. But when it comes to the tight end position and the wide receiver position, I'm a little bit more willing to go older.
And Kelly, I played in dynasties with you as well. I think it's safe to say you're playing to win year one immediately as well, correct?
Yeah, again, same as Austin within reason. I'm not afraid to take a 27, 28, 29, 30-year-old player. Mark Andrews, I think, is 27-ish.
Yeah, I believe that's
and I just happen to like tight ends. I was actually quoted in a recent article. I don't know if it came out yet, but it was at the 4for4 network. And it's about tight ends in PPR. And I feel like people don't pay attention to the receptions that a tight end receives. There are more receivers than ever before. And everybody just wants to jump and pile on and give tight ends a bad rap. But you might want to check those numbers before you draft another ho-hum wide receiver.
And I'm going to have you keep going, Kelly, and I'm going to have you continue off of a little bit of what Austin said. I was a little surprised at how many running backs in a Superflex are going this early. My experience with Superflex is the first 2 rounds are quarterbacks, wide receivers, Travis Kelce, and 1 tight end. And let me just throw out a disclaimer for everyone. Austin says Kelce. I say Kelce. Austin is going off of the information that the Kelce brothers have said out loud that their name is actually Kelce, and Austin is showing respect there. Leave your hateful comments if you like. We don't care. But anyway, a lot of running backs going, and Austin is a contributor to that running back. Austin took 2 at the turn. Kelly, you're just now taking your first in the 5th round. So Kelly, are you a load up on pass catchers? You've leaned a lot on, playing into PPR. Are you a load up on pass catchers and avoid running backs till this late every time? Or is it just how this draft has fallen?
No, I would avoid running backs this late in any PPR. And it's actually, I am shocked at how many running backs are already gone. And that is why I took Gibbs here. I did not want to miss out on Gibbs. I think he's going to be an excellent addition to the Lions. And I'm kind of sad that I didn't stack that in retrospect. But here we are. And yeah, I would not have expected to see that many running backs gone already.
And Austin, you leaned into it. You went running back early. Now, most folks, when you're going running back early, it's something we literally just talked about. It is I'm playing to win now, but you also stayed within an age range there. So.
Yeah, and I wonder, we haven't seen this trend happening as much when when we were doing startup drafts about a month ago. It was not happening this way. We were seeing more people lean towards receivers. And I wonder if part of what's happening is after the draft, everybody's realizing like there's a lot of very packed backfields. There's not a lot of clear number ones, like 3 down backs throughout the league right now. And so people are shooting their shot and getting those number one running backs while they can. Because I feel like running back is starting to become more like tight end, where the drop off is going to be so significant in terms of opportunities.
I don't like having you guys doing a lot of focus on your team, so we're just going to kind of work down the class here. So Walkman took Breece Hall, and then Ramondre Stevenson, but 5th round, Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a quarterback in turmoil right now, and it just recently came out, Kelly, that they view Hendon Hooker as a rookie as a redshirt year, meaning it is Goff's team this year for sure. 5th round for a guy who arguably may not have a team next year still feels kind of early. Where do you look at Jared Goff right now in Dynasty?
That's a win year one strategy. So if I would have picked Gibbs instead of Moore, my next pick would have been Goff. But I'm sitting here thinking Goff is probably not going to go this round. But again, here we are, surprise.
Yeah.
I actually would have expected Goff to go down there with Jay Stern, because it looks like we're playing a similar game here as I look at the board.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise, but I think that is a win year one strategy. Goff will rack up the points. The team will be winners. He's got plenty of receivers. So, yeah, if you've already got a solid QB1, which there is right there in Jalen Hurts,
yeah,
I think that's a great move.
Austin, continuing with that, Goff is only 28 and probably turns 29 this year. If Goff is not a Detroit Lion next year, he's likely someone who's going to end up on a team where he can still play. So is he still a worthy dynasty asset?
I don't know. It kind of probably depends on how he plays this year. I don't know that he's going to, at what would be age 29, step into a starter role at a different team, unless it's like he turns into the new Jimmy G, where he's just kind of like filling in a year for a team that needs a veteran quarterback while they solve their quarterback problems. I think also, though, like I'm fine taking Jared Goff right now, for the win now strategy, but also like the Lions are going to say whatever they want about Hendon Hooker. And the reality is Hendon Hooker, he's recovering from an ACL right now. We don't know what he's going to be in the NFL yet. And he's coming from an offense that did not have receivers that ran actual routes. It was a weird offense from Tennessee. And so we don't really know how he's going to translate. I think the potential is there. I like his personality. He seems like a good locker room guy. And so maybe he ends up in that role, but I don't feel like this is we brought in Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers situation where like there's a little bit of an intimidation factor there for some reason. Yeah. But I think it's more so like if Desmond Ridder had come in behind Jared Goff, like would we really be that afraid of Desmond Ridder behind Jared Goff? Maybe. But like it's kind of like, well, we'll see what happens. They're probably going to be competing for that spot.
I'm going to have you keep going with this one. I'm going to skip the next team. I'm skipping Lundy for now because he has an interesting draft strategy, so I want to approach his team a little bit later. So, Austin, while you're making your picks here, moving over to Faith's team, she has a lot of really nice picks. The Trey Lance pick, I know you and Faith have had deals in fantasy regarding Trey Lance, but that's not even the pick I want to talk about. We're looking at her team. I want to talk about DeAndre Swift, and I'm going to give both of you guys kind of talk about DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift, for those that don't remember, was taken ahead of Jonathan Taylor in an actual NFL draft, and still behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Great job, Kansas City. But DeAndre Swift is now moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles from the Detroit Lions after the Lions draft Jahmyr Gibbs. How do we feel about DeAndre Swift as a 4th-round pick in a very kind of tumultuous career year right now, Austin? 5th-round pick, my apologies, Faith. But a 5th-round pick, and what is a very career-defining year probably for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I don't, I still don't love having DeAndre Swift as my RB1 in any format ever. But given the situation he has landed in Philadelphia, I mean, basically what the Eagles have said is we're going to place our lottery bets on the injury risk and see how it works. And we've gotten as many lottery tickets as we can. We're either going to have Rashad Penny light it up while he's healthy, or DeAndre Swift light it up while he's healthy. And then we've got two running backs that have been around, and Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, for a while, that we'll have around if Swift and Penny end up, riding the bench the rest of the year, recovering with whatever injury they come up with. So, I'm fine with it, particularly in the PPR format. I mean, DeAndre Swift was getting so many receptions last year, and I don't expect that to change significantly despite the rushing upside of Jalen Hurts. So, sure. I mean, when you're in the 5th round, I would rather look at Swift than Tony Pollard or Javonte Williams. So I think that's a perfectly fine pick there.
That's interesting because Tony Pollard obviously coming off of his own injury and Javonte Williams coming off of his own injury. So you have Swift, who, Kelly, is an injury-prone person, but you have two guys going after him who people have argued top 5, top 10 upside, but they've had their own injuries. So is the 5th round just kind of like where we're drafting injured players and we're okay with it?
It seems a bit early to me.
Okay, but I agree.
Yeah. It's right now, this whole draft feels a lot like the wild, wild west here.
It's
and I feel very backed into a corner at this point. And I would like to say, should there be more rounds? 15 rounds is good. I'm in one that's like 21 rounds, and I'd feel a little more comfortable than I do at this second. But this has been wild. So it's interesting to see those injury-prone players picked so early, or injured players picked so early, other than the Hooker pick, which you mentioned he was injured, but it is the redshirt year, and that's very different than an injury prone player that's got some tenure.
Well, and I was going to bring that pick up at the end of the show because it is your pick. And I find it interesting because like all I've done is rookie drafts so far. And Hendon Hooker's a guy who you're typically landing 3rd, 4th, if you're lucky, in these rookie Superflex drafts. But to see where he's going in a startup is very interesting. But I'm going to save a lot of that for the end of the show. Kelly, I'm actually going to give you exclusive rights to answer this next question because I know how Austin feels about it. Phil Burns with the next pick, who, by the way, is the guest on the show next week. Phil, not an analyst, but does these mocks with us every week. And we love having folks on the show to bring just kind of a new take on mock drafting. Phil takes Quentin Johnston at 5'6", Kelly. 6 picks ahead of Jordan Addison going to Minnesota at the 5'11". Austin is a notorious Quentin Johnston hater. Literally made it a point to tell me he redid his rankings, reviewed 61 rookies, and I don't know if Austin realized he did this on both Superflex and 1QB. Quentin Johnston went down 1 rank in each of those because Roschon Johnson jumped ahead of him in his rankings on both of those. What is your take on Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, and we can throw in Zay Flowers with that as well, Kelly?
I look at this as an opportunity type of pick. This player, Quentin Johnston, is going to make an immediate impact, I feel. Austin Eckler's situation, even though, we're talking wide receiver versus running back, that's neither here nor there. I'm looking at the opportunity to be available. When you look at where the Chargers are, it's a little iffy. I mean, Mike Williams, yay, that's great. But when you talk about players like Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, those are going to teams that are looking a little bit reception poor. And so I feel like that's an opportunity to pick up more receptions. And when we're talking PPR, again, let's pick them up. Let's pick up.
That's kind of been the theme of the show for you, Kelly, is understanding your, but I love it. Understand your scoring and understand who's going to win in that scoring. So.
That's kind of my feeling there on that pick, is that if we're talking about Dynasty, if we're talking about teams that are having players age out, players that are moving on, players who are injured, pick up the rookie that's going to fill in the spot and they're going to get the ball.
All right, Austin, I'm going to let you lead us off with this one. Dollar Bills was very happy about Derrick Henry falling to him in the 6th round in the chat. And when we just talked about DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams, all going in the 5th round, all having injury concerns, then you have Derrick Henry, who is a 300 carry, 1,500 yard machine. What is the appropriate value for a 28-year-old monster of a man in Derrick Henry in Dynasty right now?
I think it depends very much on how you are approaching the draft, if you're taking a win now strategy or not. Like if Kevin had taken Derrick Henry, I would have been like, what are you doing? You started with all this young talent and then you drafted Derrick Henry. But I think for a team, like I think Derrick Henry would have been a great player for Faith to have actually taken instead of DeAndre Swift, because you're already starting with Cooper Kupp. So you're clearly going a win now strategy. You're saying, I'm taking an older receiver that's got probably 3 years left of elite talent. So take Derrick Henry, get the elite production there. He was also more efficient in the pass game last year than we traditionally saw from Derrick Henry. So to Kelly's point, he brings that PPR upside as well. Another player in the same vein is Dalvin Cook going to the 7th round and Aaron Jones just getting selected in the 8th round. Like those are two players that I imagine keep a similar role in their offenses. So if you're trying to win now, those are the types of running backs I would be looking to target.
And Kelly, I'm going to have you continue on that. I know you have a pick coming up here in a second, but let's focus on these older running backs. And, Dalvin Cook's another one to kind of lump in there, and he went just almost a full round after Derrick Henry. But Derrick Henry, when he plays, there is no debate on him being a top 5 fantasy running back. But then history tells us it's going to stop eventually. Father Time is undefeated, Kelly.
That's true, but here's the thing. When you look at who's available now at this point in the draft for a running back, after so many have been drafted so early on, you're left, which is where I'm at, with a lot of slim pickings when it comes to receiving. And at this point, which you're going to see shortly in my next move, that you're not left with a lot of young guns, and the ones who are younger are not that productive. But then we could always fall back on the last argument of they're just behind an aged running back. So once that aged running back falls off, then your guy is next. You've got the RB2, hopefully. But
yeah.
That's if you're picking one of these, if you're picking an RB2 at this point, because there were plenty of RB1s, but to your point, they're on the older end of the spectrum.
Well, and that's kind of what we're running into.
Right. So here we go with my next pick. I'm still on that reception train. Tight ends at this point in the draft are pulling far more receptions than any of the RBs that are left, and a lot, and just a couple, maybe even just one more round, more receptions than our wide receivers who are left. So it's time to start looking at your options.
Well, I like that a lot because you're doing two things with that pick, and this is gonna. Do you subscribe? It was a strategy that was getting floated on Twitter about 2 years ago, the bully tight end strategy. And normally that would involve taking tight ends far earlier to make sure you're getting 2 of the elite guys. But you were kind of able to have Darren Waller fall in your lap here. And Darren Waller moves on to a new situation where you could argue, and it wouldn't be a hard argument, and don't argue with Kelly anyway because you're just dumb. You could argue that Darren Waller is the number 1 wide receiver for the Giants. So is that how you're looking at this, Kelly? Because not only are you adding a great PPR pass catcher, you're also shortening the tight end pool for the rest of the league by having 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm surprised I only have 2 at this point, and that's because of my whole quarterback situation. When there's an opportunity to play multiple tight ends, as we have in this case, I can play up to 4 tight ends if I'm not playing a Superflex QB, which would be silly. So I have the opportunity to play up to 3 tight ends realistically, and I would typically fill all of those spots with the tight ends that we have in this year's field, even being Dynasty, because they're not that old. They're a fairly young group of players compared to our running back situation, which is filled with a lot more older players. The tight end room is a lot smaller than any other field, I feel, in the terms of receptions. So they're a lot more valuable. But again, people just don't give enough credit, I think, to tight ends in a PPR league.
Austin, was it a consideration for you when you land Kelsey with second round draft capital? Are you considering taking another tight end in the 9th round or anytime soon? Or are you typically, because it's Kelsey and we're dealing with 34 years old, are you definitely looking for just much younger guys to kind of start your stable later on?
Yeah, that's my strategy when I draft Travis Kelsey in particular. Like I will draft because he's like the oldest of these tight ends as well. I'll draft early, and then towards the end of the draft, I'm probably going to start soon, frankly, picking some of the younger tight ends that I think have significant upside and can develop in the next 2 to 3 years to take over the reins as Travis Kelsey ages, and inevitably he's going to retire.
Yeah. Just kind of moving along. I'm going to go back to Jacob Lundy's team because he was one of the only ones, he and Jay Stern, who I guess we can kind of lump both of their teams in together. I'm going to draw attention to their two teams right now. So you have Lundy here picking from the 104 and Jay Stern picking from the 109. They have both heavily focused on every position except running back, Kelly. So when you look at Lundy at the 1-4, he went Hurts and Murray right off the rip, 2 rushing quarterbacks, loaded up at wide receiver before finally coming back to Joe Mixon, who may have legal problems, may have problems with his role on his own team, comes back to DeAndre Hopkins for the possible Kyler Murray stack, assuming when they play, and then Isaiah Pacheco. And then we can kind of just look at Stern the same way. He prioritized the wide receivers. So Kelly, I just want you to kind of look at both of those teams. How do we feel about 0 running back in a dynasty startup?
That's such a tough question, but I feel like this is the right move. This is where I would have expected to start seeing the run on running backs. So I really feel for that team there with Mixon and Pacheco there. And however, I do like the DeAndre Hopkins pick there. Okay. I think that Hopkins is going to be productive no matter where he lands. And he's coming up on the elder years of 30, but he wants a win. It's going to happen for him no matter where he lands. I think this is the year of Hopkins and probably the only year of Hopkins from now on. But I like that pick, and I feel sad that there's not as many RBs available, but that's where I would have expected them to go. And I think that those were the best picks for this year, and probably looking to next year's rookie draft to draft some younger running backs.
Yeah, Austin, same question. Just how do you feel about these two teams? I've always kind of joked that if one team is doing 0 running back, I feel I'm a little worried for them. But if 2 or 3 teams are doing it, you kind of open up the running back pool a little bit if not everybody else is just attacking running back. So how do you feel about how these teams have turned out so far, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a classic example of zigging while everyone else zags, and I really like it. And frankly, watching how this draft board has gone, if I could go back and do this draft again, I would probably do the same thing. I would still get Travis Kelsey, but then I would have done my receiver run instead of going with Kenneth Walker and Najee Harris, because I frankly don't like any of the wide receiver options left. And being able to have Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, and Deebo Samuel as my 3 starters out the gate, I feel incredibly comfortable with that. Where I'm at right now, I don't really know. I feel a little nervous about it. Don't love it. And also seeing the running back options still on the board, like James Conner, yeah, he gets hurt a lot, but when he's on the field, he's a top 10 running back. And particularly this year when Kyler Murray is not going to be starting the season to take away rushing opportunities, David Montgomery has landed in a really great situation. Brian Robinson didn't go until the 10th round. Damian Pierce went in the 9th round. Like, there is some solid running backs that just went in these past 2 rounds that I could have grabbed if I had taken the strategy that Jacob Lundy and Jay Stern did.
Kelly, we had a great user question, and then this is this is more of a rookie draft question. I'm going to get it off the screen here in a second, so it's not covering your face up. But as someone who already has Kenneth Walker on their team, they're always trying to add Zach Charbonnett in these drafts. What range have we kind of seen Charbonnett going? Now, we've done a plethora of rookie drafts, and I've been doing a few of my own, not just the mock drafts. He's typically falling late first, early second, and I've seen him as high as the 1.6, 1.7 on some of these picks, and I'm talking Superflex. One QB, it could even move up a little bit. Instead of answering where is he falling, because that's where he's falling, late first, early second, are you, as a Kenneth Walker owner, prioritizing Zach Charbonnett so that you have to choose between the two of them, or are you maybe looking to move Walker and just get out of this situation altogether?
I don't personally subscribe to having both. I think it's one or the other. In that case, Kenneth Walker is still a young guy, and splitting workload is not typically a good thing. Although when you're in a corner, sometimes that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
I know we're not supposed to talk about our own teams all the time, but I have Tyler Lockett. I was going to split that workload up. I was going to grab AJ Dillon and split that workload up. Yeah. So I can see why it would happen, but I wouldn't necessarily scramble to grab Charbonnett. When there's a lot of other talent out there and you've already got that covered.
Yeah, and in a startup, I'm certainly not. But Austin, when you're looking at rookie drafts, should the Kenneth Walker manager be looking to prioritize Charbonnett, or are you looking to diversify your bonds?
I'm more looking to diversify, because if the fears that Charbonnett is going to take away touches from Kenneth Walker, well, Kenneth Walker is also going to take away touches from Zach Charbonnett. And so I would be looking to try and find a different, if you're drafting for need and looking for a running back, I would look for a different running back that has more upside to potentially be that workhorse. But I mostly I would look elsewhere. I'm not trying to have two players from the same team and then pick which one I think is going to end up being the number one.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of rookie talent this year, Ryan. I feel like when we look at teams, there's so many injuries, there's so many retirements, there's a huge shakeup in the trade space. There's a lot of aging players where the season of rookies before didn't quite pan out, I think, as we thought it might. And so this season of rookies that's coming in, no matter the position, I feel it's very broad. They're filling holes that previous seasons have left behind, and they're going to get that immediate play.
Yeah. Now, I agree completely. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And this is one where all three of us are in agreement. I'm not really looking to immediately draft my running back handcuff, especially when it's 1 year behind. If Kenneth Walker were coming towards the end of his rookie deal, right, maybe, but that's not the situation we're in. There's one last question I'm going to ask before I have this really cool question that's something you guys touched on before that I think is going to probably take us to the end of the show. The last player we haven't really talked about that I find interesting, because Kelly, you talked about, you've done a great job talking about tight ends on this show. Austin and myself also believer in tight end value. So I think this was just a very high praise tight end show. But nobody's really had a chance to talk about Kevin drafting TJ Hockenson. And I recently did my first ever Dynasty article for Football Guys, and it was about how to value these tight ends in a startup draft. And one of the numbers that kind of hit me is TJ Hockenson who we want Kyle Pitts to be? TJ Hockenson has 2 top 10, top 5 years under his belt already. He's just turning 25 years old. Should we be giving TJ Hockenson a little bit more respect, and at the very least being tied to Kirk Cousins in a very high passing volume offense? Kelly, should we be giving TJ Hockenson Kyle Pitts respect?
I was actually thinking that very same thing myself. Hockenson probably would have been the next go round. I feel as if he's not getting the respect that he deserves. Very high receptions in Hockenson. And just because his quarterback is aging, his quarterback is very consistent, and the rest of the team is very consistent. in their performance. So I feel like Hawkinson's a great value. And I think it was a good pick, even that early on, which some people may think is a lot earlier for tight ends. But yeah, not enough respect there on Hawk.
Yeah, I mean, while it does feel early, it is a full 3.5 rounds after Kyle Pitts, Austin. Now, I know you're a Falcons fan, but that's 3.5 rounds after Pitts. Is TJ Hockenson a value at this point?
It's yes, and maybe.
Ooh.
Like so the thing is, first off, if I'm not drafting Travis Kelce, I'm probably waiting to get TJ Hockenson later on because the value's there. I do have some concerns about how much upside we should expect from him, partially because there are a lot of weapons suddenly forming in that Minnesota Vikings offense. You now have 3 receivers that I feel like, well, obviously there's Justin Jefferson. The other 2 receivers, I feel like either one of them could be the number 2 target competing with TJ Hockenson. The other thing, and I was listening to the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast, and so they pointed this out, and I think it was a really good point. The gap between TJ Hockenson and Travis Kelce last year was 100 points, and TJ Hockenson was the number 2 tight end. That is the largest gap between tight end 1 and tight end 2 that we have had in several years. And so there's part of me that is concerned that we might have this bias like, oh, it's TJ Hockenson now, when we just had an awful year at tight end outside of Travis Kelce. And that when we see Mark Andrews coming back and Darren Waller having a better season and maybe Kyle Pitts has a rebound, that all of a sudden TJ Hockenson isn't going to seem like this no-brainer number 2 tight end in the tight end group. So I think I'm comfortable with where he's going. I could understand someone taking him earlier, but I'm not ready to get to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, he's like, you have to take him like first 3 rounds like we're doing with Kyle Pitts.
It's a really good point, and it's something we've joked about. We've literally called it the tight end wasteland for how long? And so it's not it's TJ Hockenson just the brightest of the dull, or the sharpest of the dull knives. Like, if these other guys get their shit together, it could certainly change the game up quite a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about your teams, but the last question I want to ask you guys, and then I'll let you guys kind of wax poetically about your teams. Austin, you had said something earlier that I thought was very good when it comes to talking startup strategy. And you said if Kevin had taken Derrick Henry, you would have wondered what he was doing. And then we look at a lot of these teams in this draft, and we're kind of getting 2 different stories told. And Kelly, you're an avid DFS player. You do a ton of DFS articles. Austin, you do the DFS articles here for Club Fantasy. Your team should tell a story is kind of like the theme that we've always said for DFS. Should it be the same way in Dynasty? Should I be not taking old running backs if I went super young at wide receiver? Should I be able to see a story of your team versus just always grabbing the best player available regardless of age, Austin?
Yeah, I think so, because I think like when you're playing Dynasty, you need to come in with a strategy. Like, is your strategy, I'm going to win this year, or is your strategy, I'm going to win in 3 to 5 years? Or is my strategy, I'm going to win every year? Like, some people try and like walk that balance. And so I do think there needs to be some element of that as well. The issue with that is in DFS, you have a lot more control over the story you can tell, because you can pick whoever you want, whatever players you want, and you have a certain salary cap to fit that within. But in Dynasty, you don't control your destiny. You don't control your story. And so you have to be able to be flexible when someone tries to rewrite your story for you. And I think that's part of what we're seeing happening as well. Is like my team, I had one story, and then I was like, oh shoot, I am writing a different story than I thought I was, and I've got to make it up on the spot.
Kelly, same question. Like I said, it's a big thing in Dynasty. I think every year when I hosted the Dynasty, or the DFS rather, the DFS folks would always say your team should tell a story. Are you predicting a blowout for this game? Is it okay to mix and match when it comes to Dynasty, or are you trying to tell that story as well?
No, I am very much of the mix and match.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to win that day. And it also depends on what kind of contest you're in as well.
Yeah.
Like Goff, for instance, this week is a good example. I thought I was doing great going into the weekend, did not end up doing so great, revamped for just the weekend. So in certain DFS contests and the way they're set up, you don't necessarily need to tell that long-term story. In Dynasty here, I think you can toe the line. If you're going to go young on your wide receivers and older on your running backs, then I think you're probably, hopefully, you've done research and you're like, hey, I'm aiming to grab this guy in next year's rookie draft, or I already have a plan to trade. So I think you can balance a win this year and a win next year, even with guys who age out, but it is tough for sure.
Gotcha. I like that. It's build your team the way you're happy building your team. While you guys are getting ready to make your last couple picks here, I'm actually going to go in a little early on my oops of the draft because I have to be perfectly honest. It is insane to me that this happened. I didn't notice it until Austin drew attention to Kevin should not have drafted Derrick Henry, that Kevin did draft Nick Chubb with the the first pick of the 6th round is what I'm trying to say here. Nick Chubb, who arguably is the best talented running back in the entire NFL at 27 years old. The oops is not Kevin taking him. The oops is everybody ignoring him for 60 picks in a startup draft for a guy who is on arguably one of the better offenses in the league and is probably the best running back in the entire league. So shame on all of you building win now teams and letting Nick Chubb fall to Kevin. But more importantly, Kelly kind of already hit this on the head. Kevin knows what type of team he's building. And Kevin, if this were a real league, would be trading Nick Chubb for 2024 and 2025 picks because he doesn't want him on his team. He wants the value. And I think that's just such an interesting way of looking at things. But my goodness, the Nick Chubb disrespect gets me every single year. Every year we find reasons to not call this guy a top 10 running back when he's probably a top 5 running back. Like it's a little ridiculous to me. So shame on all of you. You still haven't had a chance to make your picks, but I'm going to have you guys get started on recapping your team and you'll just be making picks while you're recapping your team because that's the way the show's got to go. So Austin, again, you know the rules at this point. You do not need to talk about your entire team, but you did say your story started with one thing and changed to another thing. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was going to like the strategy of getting the 2 young running backs early. And then by the time I was getting receivers, I was really annoyed with the receiver options I had available to me. And I really don't like my team coming out of it on the other side because of the receiving option. I can't remember the guest that said this last year, but it has been ingrained in my mind that they said, when you start to feel uncomfortable in a draft, you just need to lean into it and you'll get out on the other side. And I frankly wish I had done that more because after I went 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs and tight end, I started to panic about receivers. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to get receivers then. And I wish in hindsight, I just said, you know what, lean into it, get some more running backs because now I'm looking and there are receivers that I'm like, yeah, I feel good about them actually. Like I like their chances to potentially break out. I think they're undervalued players. Alec Pierce is a good example. With Indianapolis going into his 2nd year, there's a lot of potential upside there. The fact that KJ Osborne is still available, like he could end up as the wide receiver 2 in that offense. I know everybody loves to hate on Kayshon Boutte, but I am a fan.
Yeah, you've been beating that drum a little bit.
I'm intrigued by Chase Claypool. I know that's a wild take for some folks, but like the Bears, they traded a 2nd round pick for him. Like he came in the middle of the year and wasn't utilized because he's not Christian McCaffrey who can be learning the formations on the flight and step in the next game and start for their new team. So yeah. I wish I just leaned into that and said, you know what, I'm just going to take as many dart throws as I can later on the receiving position and focus on building out my running back room now. And I think I would have been happier with my team overall.
Perfect. Kelly, same exact deal. Like I said, you don't have to talk about every player, but did you have a strategy? Obviously, I would love for you to talk about going J. Jeff over any of the quarterbacks with your 2nd pick, though.
Yeah, that wasn't just previous mocks and previous drafts that I've already done. I'm in the midst of a Dynasty Startup right now, and I feel as if Dynasty Startup PPR, I feel as if quarterbacks are just going to go later, and obviously that wasn't the case. So my strategy was in reception in mind, and that didn't pan out. So I was forced to make a change in a place that was not comfortable to make a change, which left me with kind of weak second half of my draft. Although there is some value still in there, the goal was to have a nice mix of rookie picks, win now picks, and then the rest was kind of just fill it in with ho-hum. I kind of accomplished that in a sense, but I was very uncomfortable in having to be forced to fill out my quarterback room at that moment.
Yeah, now you did an interesting strategy with quarterbacks though, because I feel like Geno Smith for a veteran is one of the hotter trade commodities right now. So if you halfway through this season and Geno Smith is playing well, you now have trade bait in a season like this where it's like, okay, well, let me acquire some more 2024 picks. And more importantly, you grab two of the rookies. We know Hendon Hooker's not playing this year, but you also have Bryce Young who's likely to play. So you've done two things where you do have two starting quarterbacks, but you've kind of secured your future as well. So I feel like it's a well-mixed team all in
all. Out of like 4
We have basically lost Kelly. I just sent her a little private text so she knows what's going on here. But we have just hit the 1 hour mark anyway, and I don't like to keep this show going for longer than an hour. If we can get Kelly back on, I want to definitely give her time to do her outro. So let's see, Kelly, how you looking there? No, we're still very digitalized. So I'm just going to do a quick outro. I'm sorry. So Austin, thank you for joining us this week. Kelly, thank you for joining us this week. Folks, we do this show every single Monday. So if you're not following Club Fantasy on all the socials at Club Fantasy FFL, you need to be. We put the invitation out for this draft every Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. The show goes live at 11. But this is not all we do. We have a new Dynasty Focus show, Dynasty After Party, that airs every Sunday night at 9:30. They just did episode 3 last night talking about impact rookies. We have a live show every single Wednesday, though, of course, it's not live this Wednesday when I tell you it's live every week. But we are doing our annual Intro to Dynasty show. I will actually be the host with our great Joe Zolo, Michael Sicoli, and Matt Montgomery from Football Guys. And we're going to be giving you guys the ins and outs of IDP. If I said Dynasty, I apologize. It's Intro to IDP. And we're going to be teaching you about IDP this upcoming Wednesday at 7 o'clock. It just won't be live this week. Kelly is going to be live every single week with her golf show on Tuesday night with Adam. And then, like I said, this show is going to be back next week. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, it's going to be with Phil Burns. Burns has been in every one of our drafts so far this season. He's not necessarily an analyst, but he is going to be explaining how he uses mock drafts. And we like to bring fresh voices to the show every single season. We're going to have that next week with Phil Burns. Always remember, folks, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you at the next mock